Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the system that pretty much defined the Middle Ages and, believe it or not, laid the groundwork for our modern world feudalism. It's that whole world of kings, knights, and castles, all held together by two really big ideas land and loyalty. Let's get into it. So, to really get why feudalism even existed, we've got to start by asking a really big question. What happens when a massive central power, like the Roman Empire, a power that kept Europe stable for centuries, what happens when it just disappears? And, well, that's exactly what happened. When Rome fell, it wasn't just a change in government. The entire idea of a central authority just vanished. And that plunged the whole continent into this era of instability, creating a desperate need for some new kind of order.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It paints a picture of a continent in total turmoil. After Rome collapses in 476, all the infrastructure that held Europe together just crumbles. Roads decay, trade dries up, cities shrink. And to make matters way worse, for the next few hundred years, you have these constant waves of invasions from Vikings, Magyars, and Saracens. It created this constant state of fear. In a world like that, security wasn't just a priority, it was everything.
So, out of all this chaos, this new system starts to bubble up feudalism. Now, this wasn't some grand plan cooked up in a meeting. It was an organic, practical solution to a huge problem. Power became decentralized, which just means it was super local, and the ultimate source of wealth and power wasn't gold anymore. It was the one thing you could actually hold and defend land. So, what did this new society actually look like? Well, the easiest way to picture it is as a giant pyramid. Every single layer is built on obligation, supporting the layer right above it.
Right at the very top of this pyramid, you've got the king. In theory, every inch of land in the kingdom belonged to him. But in reality, there was no way he could manage all of it by himself. His direct control was actually pretty limited.
So, what does he do? He grants these huge chunks of land, they were called fiefs, to his most powerful and trusted allies, the nobles and lords. In exchange for all that land, they swore loyalty and promised to give him soldiers whenever he needed them. And this whole system just keeps cascading down. The big shot lords would then take their massive estates and divide them up, granting smaller parcels to their own followers, the knights. This created a professional warrior class, the armored backbone of any army, whose entire job was to fight for their lord.
And then, at the very bottom, holding this entire thing up, you have the peasants and serfs. And we're talking about the vast majority of people here, like maybe 90% of the population. They worked the land, and their labor fed absolutely everyone: the king, the lords, the knights. And what did they get in return? A place to live, and most importantly, protection from all those invaders. Now, what's so crucial to get here is how personal this all was. The whole system was held together by something called the feudal contract, a formal public oath. A lord grants land, and the vassal, in a big ceremony, swears loyalty in return. This wasn't just some legal document. It was a sacred, binding promise between two people.
And for the knights, that contract was backed up by the code of chivalry. This was way more than just a rulebook. It was their whole ethical guide. It demanded total loyalty to their lord, incredible bravery in battle, honor in everything they did, and a duty to protect the weak. You could almost think of it as the moral software running on the hardware of their armor and swords. Okay, so that's the big picture structure. But what was daily life actually like for all those people at the bottom of the pyramid? Well, to get that, we need to zoom in on the manor. The manor was basically the economic engine of the feudal world. Think of it like a little self-contained village. Pretty much everything, food, clothes, tools, was produced right there. Long-distance trade was almost non-existent, so if you couldn't grow it or make it on the manor, you probably weren't going to get it. And this brings us to a really important distinction. We tend to use the words peasant and serf like they're the same thing, but they weren't. Peasants were technically free people, even if their options were super limited. Serfs, on the other hand, were bound to the land. They weren't slaves who could be bought and sold, but they were considered part of the estate. If the lord sold the manor, the serfs went with it. And you absolutely cannot talk about this time without mentioning the single most powerful institution of the era, the church.
It was a massive landowner in its own right, a political force that could go toe-to-toe with kings, and it was the undisputed spiritual and social center of everyone's life, guiding them from the moment they were born to the moment they died.
Now, here's what's really wild. This whole decentralized land for loyalty system wasn't just a European thing. Half a world away, Japan, dealing with its own period of chaos, independently developed a system that was shockingly similar. Instead of a king, they had a shogun. Instead of lords, they had these powerful landowners called daimyo. And instead of knights, they had the legendary samurai. It's just an amazing example of how similar problems can lead to similar solutions.
But, no system lasts forever. The world that created feudalism began to change, and as it changed, the very foundations of that power pyramid started to crack. And this wasn't some sudden collapse. It was a slow burn, a decline that took centuries. A few key things started to chip away at those old feudal bonds. Trade started coming back, cities started growing again, and most dramatically, the Black Death. By wiping out a massive chunk of the population, the plague created a huge labor shortage, which suddenly gave the peasants who survived way more leverage and power than they'd ever had before. The first huge game changer was money. As trade networks and cities grew, wealth wasn't just about land anymore. A king could now hire soldiers for cash, creating professional armies that were loyal to him because he paid them, not because of some ancient oath. This second big disruptor was technology. Gunpowder. This invention completely upended the military logic of the age. All of a sudden, those mighty stone castles that had been the cornerstone of feudal defense for centuries could be knocked down by cannons. And an armored knight, the apex predator of the battlefield, was now vulnerable to a common soldier with a gun. The military dominance of the nobles was over. So it's really important to see that the end of feudalism wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something totally new. Its decay is what cleared the path for the world we recognize today, a world with powerful central nations, with bustling cities as the heart of commerce, and the beginnings of capitalism. At the end of the day, feudalism was a solution for a world in chaos. It was this incredibly complex web of personal loyalties that shaped politics, war, and everyday life for almost 1,000 years. And understanding it is so key to understanding how we got to where we are today. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The system itself is long gone, sure, but its legacy isn't. So where in our own modern world do we still see the echoes of those ancient ideas of loyalty, service, and a pyramid of power?